I shall never ask any pilot to go on a mission that I won't go on. Eddie Rickenbacker. We'll start with a short scenario. We'll have a student discussion. I was planning on a G1000, but it sounds like Anthony has something for us that he wants to share. We'll get into systems, ATC, airspace, and airports. We'll do a quiz and assign some homework. And again, as usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. So here's the scenario. We're cruising at 6,000 feet and your engine starts running rough and you notice a drop in your RPMs. Suddenly, everything becomes much quieter. What's happening? Who wants to take it?
I just started thinking of a Magneto problem.
It's possible. So what are you going to do?
Think about getting to a emergency airport.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Anybody else want to chime in?
Get as much altitude as you can.
That's possible. Yeah. In this case, essentially your engine is cut out.
And it's already out.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when it suddenly becomes quiet, you've lost your RPMs. You can assume that your engine's failing or is about to fail. So what are the ABCs of an engine failure? Do you guys remember?
Nope.
No worries. The ABCs are airspeed. That's your best glide speed. In the Cessna 172, it's going to be about 65 knots. B is your best place to land. So you're going to look around and find a place to land. And then C is your checklist. So let's break it down really slow. Everything happens in general aviation. Everything happens pretty slowly. So your engine dies. You're going to pitch up and trim off so you can take your hands off the controls. Pitch for that best glide speed, 65 knots in the 172, 60, I think, in the 152. Once you are trimmed for hands-off flight, then you're going to look around and find your best place to land. A lot of the time it's behind you, maybe an airport you just passed or your point of departure. And then you're going to set yourself up to land at that grass field or that airport. And then you're going to pull out your checklist and start troubleshooting the problem. You always want to aviate, navigate, and then communicate. Right? So you don't want to get bogged down in calling ATC before you have everything else figured out, right? So it's priorities of work kind of thing. So make sure you're set up to land safely and you're troubleshooting the problem, and then worry about talking to ATC. Bonus questions. Do you guys remember what the emergency transponder codes are?
7500, 7600, and 7700.
What do they stand? What do they stand for?
7700 was okay. I don't remember what each code is like specifically, but I know 7500 is for hijacking.
That's right.
One of them's for I think a radio problem.
Right.
And the other one's general emergency, I think.
Exactly. 7.5 taken alive. 7.6 radios nixed. 7.7 going to heaven. General emergency. Awesome. You got it. Bam. Any questions before we move on? All right, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the carburetor. So the carburetor is a device that mixes air and fuel and sends it to the engine to burn. And this is kind of what it looks like. You've got the fuel inlet. The fuel comes into here, into this chamber. And then the mixture needle allows the fuel to go into the discharge nozzle. That air is not really set right here. And then it gets mixed with air in the venturi. The shape of the venturi actually creates an area of low pressure, and then it gets sent to the engine to power the aircraft. Right. Some things to keep in mind because of the area of low pressure there. Let me go back. This area can accumulate icing, so you want to keep in mind. Be aware of carburetor icing. So, real quick, what does the carburetor do?
It mixes fuel and air in an optimum way for efficient combustion.
Perfect. You got it. It's a device that mixes fuel and air for internal combustion engines. Like I said, it is more susceptible to icing than like your fuel injection systems because of that reduced pressure and vaporization of fuel. So if you notice a loss of RPMs and some maybe like chunking sounds in your engine, there's a good chance you have carburetor icing. And if you do, or if you suspect you have carb ice, you turn on your carb heat. This can happen between 20 degrees and 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Invisible moisture or high humidity. So keep that in mind. If you have a fuel injection system, obviously you don't have a carburetor. So yeah, the carb heat actually takes hot air from your engine and pumps it into the venturi. This enriches the fuel air mixture because warm air is less dense than cold air. This will decrease an engine output and increase your operating temperature. So in a carbureted engine or a carbureted aircraft, before we depart, I don't know if you guys have noticed. Whenever we do our run up, we pull up our checklist, and one of the things that you do is a magneto check. So you you turn off one magneto, make sure there's a drop in RPMs, turn it back, the second mag back, right? And we also do a carb heat check. When you pull that carb heat, you should see a noticeable drop in RPMs. And again, that's because the warm air is less dense than cold air. All right, to recap, what does a carburetor do? Not whoever just answered me.
It mixes fuel and air for internal combustion.
Exactly. Device that mixes air and fuel for internal combustion engines. What's the first indication of carb ice?
Lower RPM.
That's right, loss of RPM. All right, let's talk about the fuel-air mixture. This is the ratio of weight of fuel and the weight of air entering the cylinder. And we need to adjust our mixture whenever we climb up to a different altitude. So as we climb up above like 3,000 feet, that's usually when we start leaning the mixture to account for that change in air density. Let's talk about abnormal combustion. Detonation is when the fuel-air mixture explodes instead of burning evenly. This can happen for a number of reasons. One of them is that if you're using the wrong kind of fuel for your aircraft, usually a lower than specified grade. It can also, you'll notice that there's an excessive engine temperatures will be really hot. And if you suspect detonation, you want to lower the nose and try to cool the engine. The other abnormal combustion we talk about is pre-ignition. This is uncontrolled firing of the fuel-air charge in advance of normal spark ignition. When you go take the exam, I want you to pay attention to this word here, and these two words, in advance. So if you ever forget or get mixed up between detonation and pre-ignition, pre-ignition is in advance, and detonation is when it explodes instead of burning evenly. Here are some good aviation fuel practices when you are going and refueling your aircraft. If you can't get the right type of fuel for your aircraft, it's better to go to the next higher specified octane rating than rather than the next lower. This will prevent the possibility of detonation. You want to fill your tanks at the end of the day to prevent moisture condensation by eliminating airspace in the tanks. And anytime you go fly, at least at the first flight of the morning, you should sump your fuel to verify that there's no contaminants, water in the fuel tanks. And if there is like water in your fuel tanks, you want to keep something in to eliminate that water. Excuse me. If your engine-driven fuel pump fails, you should use your auxiliary fuel pump. Yeah. So let's review. Fuel-air mixture explodes instead of burning evenly. Is that detonation or pre-ignition?
Detonation.
That's right. It explodes, detonation. Got it. All right, let's talk about starting the engine. You know what's funny for me? Kind of a side note here. The most stressful time for me whenever I go fly is when I'm starting the aircraft because it can be embarrassing when you go to start it. It cranks up and then it dies. So some things to keep in mind. Always follow your checklist. Basically everything in aviation is done with a checklist. So, run through the checklist, start the engine. And then once the engine turns over, the first thing you want to do is adjust your throttle to adjust for proper RPM and check your oil temperature and oil pressure gauges to make sure that they are in the normal operating range. Yeah. And then hand starting. I've never had to hand start, so this is not from experience. It's just the book answer. Make sure there's a competent pilot at the controls. I don't really mess with hand started aircraft though, so not from experience. In winter months or in colder weather, your engine's going to be a little harder to start. A lot of places will actually put their aircraft in a hangar or try to warm up the engine before you start it. You do need to take special attention to your crankcase breather. The crankcase breather is a pipe that releases gases trapped in the engine, and those lines might be clogged with ice. So we use blankets to keep the engine warm. Sometimes I think there are actual like engine heaters that help keep it warm. But yeah, just keep in mind, cold weather can make it difficult to start your engine, and it's embarrassing. Okay, let's review. Uncontrolled firing of the fuel-air charge in advance of normal spark ignition. Is that detonation or pre-ignition?
Pre-ignition.
Pre-ignition, that's right. In advance, pre-ignition. Bless you. Let's talk about our electrical system. Most aircraft these days have either a 14 or 28 volt direct current system. The alternator is used. It's used to supply electrical current to the electrical system, and it helps maintain the charge of the battery. Your alternator output should be higher than the battery voltage to keep it charged. The master switch is that big red switch that turns on the electrical system, and it provides current to all the systems except the ignition system. Keep in mind, those are two separate systems. So on the test, when I ask you about that, keep that in mind. Your ammeter shows if your alternator is producing adequate power and whether the battery is receiving charge. If it's positive, it shows the rate of charge. If it's negative, it shows you the current being drawn from the battery. The alternator provides more electrical power at lower engine RPM than generators do. Let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to keep in mind about the electrical system. My recommendation, when you actually go fly, when you are studying your specific aircraft, go grab the POH and study your specific electrical system. This is all generic stuff. This is all very, book answer stuff. Go study your system and be able to draw out a basic schematic of it, and it'll be better. You'll be better equipped to handle problems in the aircraft than if you just go in with the book knowledge or the generic knowledge from the flying handbook. And I can review with you guys what a POH looks like after this. So let's review. What does an alternator do?
Alternating currents for the electrical system.
Yeah, it supplies electrical current to the electrical system. All right, any questions about systems before we move on to runway markings and airport stuff?
No.
Cool. I think this is more interesting anyways. All right, so there are different markings on the airport, and you want to be aware of what each of them mean, right? So yellow, like this is a taxiway. And as you go on to this is your runway. This is this arrow here tells us that we are allowed to taxi and depart from this portion of the runway, but we cannot land on this section. We have to land beyond this section here, right? So this area is not used for landing, only for taxi and takeoff. Beyond here, we are allowed to land. These are your designation markings. So you're going to add a 0 for the heading. So this would be a runway 200. Left tells you there are two parallel runways. So if you have the right runway, it'd be 20 right. 20 right. This is your threshold. That's the end of the runway, essentially. Your aiming points, the big refrigerators. And let's see. Yeah, so you might see variations of the runway. So this one here, this is a taxiway all the way up to the threshold. So this tells you that we are not allowed to depart from here. We can only taxi. And then once we're clear of this white mark here, then we're allowed to take off from this section of the runway. Here's your aiming points. Yeah. This tells you, these chevrons here tell you this is not suitable for taxi, takeoff, or landing. So we cannot be on this part of the runway or of the pavement, I guess. This is a taxiway. This is part of the runway that is allowed to be used for departure, but not for landing. And beyond this point, we can land. Who wants to take this one? What can we do on this portion right here?
Taxi, and that's it.
Yep. How about here? What can we do beyond this point?
Taxi and takeoff.
Great. And how about over here? What can we do once we cross this line?
You can land there as well.
Perfect. Who wants to take this one? Somebody else.
Oh, so that one's going to be the taxi way.
How about here?
This is going to be your taxi and takeoff area.
And then here.
And beyond there is your landing zone.
Cool. So this is a hold short marking. If we come in from this direction and we see the double hard line, that means we need to obtain further clearance to taxi beyond this point. So you have to hear, cleared for takeoff or cleared to cross or something of that nature. If you're coming from the opposite direction, then you are allowed to cross without getting additional clearance. So the soft side, you can clear it, or you're clear to cross it. On the hard side, you need to obtain permission to cross it.
Would this also apply to an uncontrolled airfield?
No, good question. So yeah, if you have, so let's go back just a step. So there are non-towered and towered airports. And so a towered airport, yes, you need to get permission from the tower. But if you are at a non-towered airport, you basically just have to self-report that you are departing. It's always a good idea to, let's say we're departing, to the right. When we come up to this area here, it's always good to look both ways, even do maybe a 360-degree turn on the ground to clear to clear the area to make sure you're not going to, collide with anybody. That's at non-towered airports. Good question. All right, let's talk about some taxiway signs. This here, black square, you are there. That tells you we are at taxiway Alpha. This tells us there's a runway directly ahead of us, runway 422. This is just a runway. We are at taxiway Bravo. We are at the runway 8 approach end. We are at taxiway Charlie, and we are holding short at the ILS critical area position. This means don't enter. This is a black square. You are there, so we are in taxiway Bravo. This tells us we are at runway 22. This white, so black square with white numbers tells us how much runway we have available. So you'll see those on the edge of the runway as you depart, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. It's basically a countdown of how much distance you have remaining. It's always good. Let's back up a bit. Whenever you depart, you should always brief a couple of things. One of them being your rotate speed and your climb out speed. What you're planning on doing if you lose an engine on your departure, and what your I'm trying to think of the word. Your point of no return, essentially. Like, at what point are you going to stop or are you going to avoid, or think of the word? Hang on. Abort. That's the word. At what point are you going to abort your takeoff if you are not generating enough airspeed, right? So let's say it's a 9,000 foot runway. That's a lot of runway to play with. But on shorter runways, like 2,500 feet, that goes up pretty quick, even in our little rinky-dink Cessna 152. So it's always a good idea to brief your rotate speed, climb out speed, what to do in the event of an engine failure, and your abort position or your abort point. All right, continuing on. Some more signs. This is a runway safety area boundary. If, again, we're on the soft side, continue through. If you're on the hard side, stop. This is an ILS critical area boundary. So for our instrument guys, we don't want to get in the way of something here because it's going to interfere with instrument pilots landing. If we see this, a yellow square with arrows, it tells us, hey, taxiway Juliet is off to the right and to the left. Taxiway Kilo is off to our left. Runway 22 is ahead. This, I think it's arriving aircraft. Yeah. Directions or destination for arriving aircraft. A taxiway ending marker that tells us, hey, stop. The taxiway does not continue here. And then an array is basically a bunch of signs put together. So we are at taxiway Golf. Taxiway Alpha is to our left, and taxiway Lima is off to our right.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out the combined sign just happens to spell out AGL.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that taxiway Alpha, Golf, and Lima. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But yeah, it's cool. All right, let's do a little bit of practicing. Let's say we are here, moving in this direction. Can we proceed?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Where are we?
Taxiway Delta.
Taxiway Delta. So we proceed on through here. Now, where are we?
Taxiway Alpha.
Taxiway Alpha. If we make a left onto here, where are we?
Taxiway Alpha 1.
Alpha 1. And can we depart at a towered airport without talking to anybody?
No.
Nope. Why not?
Because you're going into the runway.
Exactly. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's say we are departing. We've gotten a clearance to depart. Can we use this area to, to get an extra couple of feet of runway?
No.
Nope. That's right. These chevrons tell us it's not safe for departure or landing. Let's see. Okay, let's say we are here now and we are holding short. What are we about to cross if we get a clearance to depart?
About to cross runway 18 or 36.
Yeah, exactly. 1836. And yeah, I think you guys get it. It's pretty obvious once you understand it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's talk about some lighting. If you see, so airports have a rotating beacon that operate at night. If you see them operating during the day, that pretty much tells you that it's not VFR conditions or visual flight rules. So that tells us that the visibility is less than 3 miles and the ceiling is less than 1,000 feet. Different colors and different patterns will mean different things. So something like green, yellow, and white indicates a heliport. If you see 2 white between green, that's a military airport. General aviation aircraft or airports are just going to be white, green. Civilian airports, white, green, white, green. Military, white, white, green, white, white, green. And again, if you're flying at night, they can be very helpful in identifying airports on the way to your destination. Blue is a taxiway, so don't land there. And then if you are at an airport or if you're approaching an airport with pilot-controlled lighting, you can use the common traffic advisory frequency on the radios to turn on the lights by either clicking 7, 5, or 3 times. So 7 is high intensity, medium, and then low intensity lights. Keep in mind, if there are other pilots in the pattern and somebody's coming into land and they have it set to like a low setting, it's really rude to click it 7 times and hit the brightness really high as they're coming in on final approach. So just pay attention, be mindful of what's going on at the airfield, and respect other people in the pattern. All right, questions before we move on?
Yeah, with this single runway example, if you on the next
this one
slide, yeah, if you wanted to land at the airport, you can't just fly right in there, right? You have to enter the pattern.
Excellent question. We're about to talk about that now.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about the traffic pattern. Typically, the traffic pattern is at 1,000 feet. We have a couple of different legs. There's the departure leg. Usually, we're flying into the wind as we depart. The crosswind leg, if the wind is moving in this direction, we are flying across the wind. Downwind, we're flying with the wind. Base, and then final. Right? If we're coming to an airport, we always, well, not always, but the standard entry is to enter at a 45-degree angle to the downwind leg, right? At 1,000 feet. And you don't want to come screaming in. You want to be at 1,000 feet above the ground as you make this entry so you don't clip anybody. Once we're beam the numbers, that's typically when we start our landing sequence. Here, I like to be about 300 feet below traffic pattern altitude or 700 feet above the ground. Make my turn to final. Be careful. This is the most likely place to enter a spin. Pilots will accidentally overshoot final and then come back. And this is the point at which you enter a spin. And since we lose about 500 feet every 3 seconds, a spin here is catastrophic. So remember, anytime you're coming on final, we are practicing go-arounds. And if we happen to land, great. Otherwise, go around and keep flying. So there's that. Standard departure is either straight out or a 45-degree angle from the crosswind leg. Unless you get cleared for something else from the tower. They might say downwind departure approved, so you can continue on downwind and depart. But this is generally accepted to be the standard departure. So to recap, you want to enter the pattern in level flight at 1,000 feet at a 45-degree angle. Maintain traffic pattern altitude, that's at 1,000 feet, until you reach the numbers, or you beam the numbers. You want to complete your turn to final at least a quarter mile away from the runway. And then as you depart, maintain runway heading. You can turn crosswind at 700 feet AGL or within 300 feet of TPA. And if you're departing, continue straight out or do that 45-degree turn after reaching traffic pattern altitude. What is the preferred method of entering the pattern at a non-towered airport?
Is it entering at a 45-degree angle to the downwind leg?
At what altitude?
1,000 feet.
You got it. Perfect. Okay, so what happens if you have two runways? Too easy. We basically just do opposing patterns. So at Payne Field, we have two parallel runways. So 1-6 right will be right pattern, 1-6 left will be left pattern. And everything works just the same, except instead of doing the standard left turns, now we're doing right turns. And everything else works the same. When we're coming into an airport without a control tower, and let's say that there's no ASOS or ATIS or AWOS reporting the weather, we might need to overfly the airport to take a look at the windsock. Typically, you want to fly this. You want to overfly the airfield 500 feet above traffic pattern altitude, observe the windsock, and then make a teardrop entry into the downwind leg at a 45-degree angle. So 500 feet above TPA, you descend as you turn. Here you're at 1,000 feet above ground, and then you enter on a 45 and then proceed as you normally would. This is the alternate way of doing it. You don't want to do it, though. This is a 500-foot drop between here and here. There might be somebody here. This is not typically accepted to be a good way to do it. I recommend continuing out teardrop, 45-degree angle, and then do it the standard way. Of course, if there's an emergency, do what you got to do. Emergencies pretty much, allow you to do, well, not anything, but as the pilot in command, you are authorized to do what you need to do to keep you and your passengers safe. Let's put it that way. All right, let's talk about more lights. The VASI, or the Visual Approach Slope Indicator. It's a 2-bar tiered of lights that will give you a general glide path indication. Red, you're dead. You're too low. You don't want to see this. 2 red over 2 white, that's good. That's on glide slope. And then 4 white or all white, you're going to fly all night. So you're too high. So you want to see it nice and balanced, as all things should be. It doesn't tell you anything about your alignment, though. So it doesn't say, you're off to the left, or you're off to the right. It only tells you if you are too high or too low. The PAPI, the Precision Approach Path Indicator, is similar, except it's going to look like this. So 4 white, you're going to fly all night. Slightly high, 3 and 1 on glide path, nice and balanced. 3 red, slightly low, and 4 red, you're dead. Too low. Questions? Cool. All right. Let's talk about wake turbulence and wingtip vortices. Wingtip vortices are only created when the aircraft is generating lift, and they are greatest when you are heavy, clean, and slow. They tend to sink below the aircraft. So if we are departing behind a heavy aircraft, they're going to sink, like this. We don't want to depart into a heavier aircraft's wingtip vortices. So we typically give about a 3-minute window after departing, after like a 737 departs. If you see one coming to land, you want to stay above and upwind of the other aircraft. So avoid wingtip vortices at all costs. Excuse me. The most dangerous wingtip vortices is when you have a light quartering tailwind, because it will the wind will generally push the wingtip vortices back onto the runway, and it'll linger there longer. So again, fly above and upwind of the flight path. Yeah, here's what they look like. So they tend to go outward, upward, and around each wingtip. This is a specific question on the exam. So remember, outward, upward, and around each wingtip. Which of these indicates slightly low?
D.
That's right, D, slightly low. And how do wingtip vortices move?
Down and back.
Outward, upward, and around each wingtip. This exact phrase will be on your test. So outward, upward, and around each wingtip. Okay, we can take 5 minutes if you want, or we can just push on. Thoughts?
Let's push on.
I agree. All right. With regard, so let me set the stage here. This is meant to emulate the knowledge exam. So, read these, treat these like you would an exam because it's going to look just like this. With regard to carburetor icing, float-type carburetor systems in comparison to fuel injection systems are generally considered to be
More susceptible.
to icing. Exactly. Detonation occurs in a reciprocating aircraft engine when
Unburned charge explodes.
the unburned charge explodes. Exactly. Filling fuel tanks after the last flight of the day is considered a good operating procedure because this will...
B.
It's actually C. Prevent
Oh.
moisture condensation by eliminating airspace in the tanks. No worries. What should the first action after starting an aircraft engine be?
Adjust for proper RPM.
That's right. Adjust for proper RPM and check the desired indications on the gauges. A positive indication on an ammeter.
Shows the rate of charge.
That's right. Shows the rate of charge on the battery. The portion of the runway identified by the letter alpha may be used for what?
Taxi and takeoff.
Taxi and takeoff. You got it. Which sign is a designation and direction of an exit taxiway from a runway? So there's Juliet, Foxtrot, and Kilo.
Kilo.
Kilo, that's right. This would tell you there's a runway off to the right, and this would tell you you are on runway 22.
Oh wait, did you wait? We had choices JFK. What a coincidence.
Yeah. Which marking indicates a vehicle lane? I didn't cover this. My bad. My bad.
I would guess C.
Yeah, Charlie. Yeah, this is where people would drive their cars if they're authorized to drive their cars on the airfield. If the wind is shown by the landing direction indicated, what the pilot should land on?
Runway 22.
All right. So the correct answer is runway 18. So a big X means it's closed. Anything that is in aviation, if you see a big X, don't use it. It's inop. It's not functional. X's are no good. So if the wind is coming from this direction, we're going to have a light or a crosswind from the right as we land on runway 18.
Gotcha.
Yeah. A slightly high glide slope indication from a precision approach path indicator is
3 white, 1 red.
3 white, 1 red. Got it. Bam, and we made it. All right, so your homework, if you choose to accept it, is to go read up on your carburetor and fuel injection systems. I'm going to pull up a POH right now, and we can kind of thumb through it. And then I would recommend reading the Airplane Flying Handbook and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. Those are both free on the FAA's website. And then I would also recommend studying this link here. Do 10 questions a day. Do a practice quiz every day, and you'll be in great shape by the time we finish this course. Any feedback from me? I know I tend to go a little fast. How was that? I tried to slow down a bit today. Thoughts? Here are my references if you guys are interested, and that's